Erling, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Omer. A pleasure to be here.
Do you have a favorite quote, something that inspires or motivates you that you can share with us?
Yeah, so one thing that's definitely been helpful for me is a quote from a book called Seven Habits of Highly Successful People. So it's about working on your circle of influence, meaning work on the things you can change today, and then gradually your circle of influence will expand and you solve the bigger problems. And for me, that's been super helpful. So instead of being frustrated or spending time on fighting these like bigger systems or things you can't do anything about, them focus on what you can do something about, like building my business, and then eventually as it expands you get perhaps the opportunity to influence a bit more.
I need a constant reminder of that as well. I tell other people, look, do you have any kind of control over this? And they go, no. And it's like, well, why are you worrying about it? Go and tackle something that you can control. And then I find myself doing the same thing. Like, it's like, anyway. So tell us about CV Partner. What does the product do? Who's it for? And what's the main problem you're helping to solve?
Yes, so CV Partner is for professional service firms. So IT consultancies, management consultancies, engineering firms. And we help them manage their resumes, CVs, and past projects, in particular for when they need to tailor them and showcase their people in the best possible way to win bids, tenders, and proposals.
Okay, great. Yeah, I want to dig into that a little bit later, because when you said that in terms of like managing CVs, that's open to so much misinterpretation. And I think you suffered some of that, right, in terms of the type of people at some point you were attracting with the product. So I think it's going to be an interesting conversation to just dig into a bit more. Give us a sense of the size of the business. Where are you in terms of revenue, customers, size of team?
Yeah, so we're about $5.5 million in ARR at the moment. We have offices in 5 countries, 42 employees, grew 47% in 2023, and currently expanding into North America.
And the business was founded 2011, 2012. And you bootstrapped for the first 10 years. You got to like 4 million in ARR before you raised some VC funding.
Yes. So we went on a long bootstrapping journey, and initially the plan was to do that forever. But at some point we realized we could potentially go a bit faster with some external capital. So that's been a big change for us, but also a great opportunity to learn and do more.
Great. So let's go back to, I guess, 2011. Where did the idea for CV Partner come from? And what were you doing at the time?
Yes, so my background is a software developer, IT consultant. So I did work in IT consultancies, but I also spent a few years in London, in the UK, and I worked in I guess this was at the time when, Lean Startup, the book had just come out. It was like all the hype. Everyone was doing testing ideas, validating, iterating. So at some point I decided I wanted to start my own business. I had lots of terrible ideas, but one of them was trying to help. At the time, it started as a B2C, so I wanted to help people apply for jobs, or in particular, like making this like resume generator. That was not a very successful business, but I had dinner with some friends who had started a consultancy, and they reminded me that in order to win a public bid, they have to put together a team of consultants. They have to go through each resume, highlight the projects, rewrite the summary, kind of really tailor it so that they look the best possible for the people evaluating the bid. And on top of that, they also have to format it. So they might have their resume template with their company logo, and they have a way they want it to look like. But actually the government, even in the US or in the EU, they all have, they say you have to deliver it on this format, and they keep changing those formats. So they spend evenings and nights copy pasting, formatting Word documents just to submit these tenders. So that was the pain we then set out to solve.
that wasn't specific just to Norway, right? Because you say you were working in London at the time as well. Because I just assumed consulting firms just sent a proposal, right? I had no idea that all of this was going on behind the scenes.
Now they are scored on. They get these, they need to win these frame agreements, for example, and they then have to prove that they have the capacity to deliver people on these projects for the next 5 years. So they might have to showcase like 100 consultants and prove that they have, 10 people with 10 years experience in this role. They worked with this technology. They worked with this. They have these certifications. So it's like a lot of things to prove, and all of that is documented in the CVs or resumes. So and it varies from country to country, but it's the gist is the same.
Got it. Okay. So you were into the lean startup at that time. So you've got this idea, and then you did all the lean startup stuff perfectly next, right?
Not so sure about that, but what I tried to do at least was to focus on the customer, and I tried to get customers from day one. So I called everyone I knew and didn't know in the consulting industry at the time, and I said, is this a pain for you, and if I solve it, will you pay for it? So they all said yes in the beginning, of course, if I solved it. But then I started building it, started to show it to them, and then I obviously kept asking, will you pay for it? And as it became better and better, I would say one day one of them said to me, like, Erling, this is really good functionality, but it looks completely so then, that's when I, took a step back and decided to hire my co-founder, Nikolai, who is a user experience expert. And yeah, it's fun because now the user experience is one of our, main selling points and why people love the tool.
So it was a developer designed product at first.
Yes.
Only developers know what that really means. Right?
Exactly.
So why was the design or the UX an issue if it's really like a tool that they're using on the back end, or was this because this was the same tool that they were going to put in front of clients to present this information, right? Or was it just because it was difficult to use? Like why did they care about it if it solved the problem?
So I guess some of it might have been, personal preference and all that, but I think we also have at least two type of users, if I simplify it. So you have the people that work putting the bids together. So a bid team, or it could be a salesperson, could be the marketing department, and they can learn to use perhaps a clunky tool. But then you also need to get the data in, and that actually means that each consultant in the company, and it can be thousands of them, or engineers, they need to access the user interface, and they actually need to update their resume or CV. And for that to be successful, it has to be super simple and really nice to use. And they won't go in and update their resume every day. They might do it once a month or once every 2 months, and then the user experience has to be like super nice each time, so that the data, the quality of the data that goes in, is good as well.
Right. Okay, so you've kind of identified this issue in terms of, the product design could be better. But how did you already know Nikolai?
Yes, we had actually met like a year before on an event called a startup weekend, where you have 48 hours to try an idea and see if it can become a business. So we did try out an idea. It did not become a business, but we definitely learned to know each other, and I knew he had that sort of complementary skill set that I so desperately needed. So,
got it. Okay, and what was your pitch to him, and how easy or hard was it for him to, say yes and join? Because it's hard enough to find. We all know it's hard enough to find a co-founder who fits, but then actually persuading them to say yes, that's just as hard, right? So what was that your experience like for you?
Yeah. So the thing is, I think he was just finishing his master's degree at the time. So I did call him and say, like, what's your plans for the fall? And he said, like, I'll come and work with you. So I said yes. So actually, that wasn't too hard. But
Okay, great. So he comes on board, and you're like, number one priority at that time is like, okay, we've got to fix this UI. How long did that take?
So that was an iterative process, but I think we got quite far in like a few months' time, probably 6 months' time. It was, completely redone. And I think in the beginning he thought that he could just sit and design stuff, and then I would implement the design. But at some point he said to me, I'll have to learn CSS and take this job from you, because otherwise it will never be good enough. So he learned that, and then he started polishing and fine-tuning and everything. Yeah.
What was the rest of the tech stack, the product that you built first?
Oh, at that point of time, it was Ruby on Rails, MongoDB, and Backbone JS, I think, all running on Amazon Web Services. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So you guys spend a few months, improve the design, the look and feel of the product. Did you have any paying customers at that point?
We got one around that time, yes, but it did take a while, and but we kept going out to the customers, showing them the improvements of the product, asking them, "Are you willing to pay now?" And they, after adjusting the UI, they, if we got closer and closer, they maybe said, "Okay, but what about this thing?" And then we went back and fixed it.
So that's a really interesting point that you just made. When I talk to a lot of founders who are at this stage, they often feel like, okay, I've got an opportunity to talk to a customer, and this is my one shot. And if I don't nail this, they will never be a customer, and I will have blown it, and the world will end, and all of that stuff. And you did something pretty smart, which was, you said you kept on going back to them, right? So for someone who's in that situation now, like, just kind of explain, like, what is it about you were just lucky and these people are like, hey, Erling, we got all the time in the world, keep coming back, it's all good? Was it about you trying to frame the meetings in a certain way? What allowed you to keep that door open with them, and for them to keep saying yes to, making time to see what you were doing?
I think it's a combination of things. So we did approach the local market, so we could walk to their offices basically. So like the consultancies that would be around us. They would also be like on the smaller size, so we kind of gone up market, more enterprise later. But they were of a smaller size, and I guess not all of them, but many of them were like also a bit excited about either lean startup or agile. There was some way sort of forward leaning. But yeah, I think we also did frame it like that. We call them, is this a problem? And we have a solution. Are you willing to look at it? We're not sure, like, completely done yet, but we would love to show it to you. But we also kept asking just straight up, like, okay, will you buy it? And then that's when you get the proof, right? So you can actually get the real feedback and go back and fix it. So no, I don't think that was. So I do. I guess my take is that there is you can always go back later. So maybe not the exact same person, but organizations, people change roles and jobs, and new people come in and new initiatives. So it's like, the timing window where it's a good time to pitch your product, that might vary, but I don't think you should be too afraid to kind of, yeah. You fail at the first time, there will be opportunities later, most times.
And how long did it take for you to go from that first customer to the first 10?
So that might have been a year or so, I would say. Yeah, it probably was. I remember, obviously, I was an engineer. I now had someone helping me with the UI, UX, but selling was still a mystery to me. So I was... I was technically confident, but when you sit down with a potential customer and you talk and you leave the meeting, I had no feeling or no clue if that was a good meeting or a bad meeting. And I remembered, like, the early days we were doing demos, and we were everything, every single functionality in the tool, every button. And we would always get into trouble because there was some quirk, some bug, something that didn't work as the customer wanted it to do. And you started like explaining and you kind of trying to hot fix it because you could program sometimes. And it just like, I think the initial meetings lasted 2 hours. So I guess some people signed up in the end just out of exhaustion. But
Yeah.
that was I guess something that I have since developed and improved on. So I think not sure how exactly it started, but I must have read a book or it was something must have clicked, because at some point I started kind of, okay, when they give me that sort of signal or cue, that means they are hooked and they're kind of happy, and actually I should just leave now. I should not keep going for another 90 minutes. So I started doing this like whenever I felt that sort of, okay, they bought it now or they bought into it, I should now leave or stop doing the demo. Those meetings went from 2 hours to, sometimes 10 minutes.
Wow. And was there a particular book or a couple of books that helped you figure that out, or was this just kind of doing this over and over again and saying?
Yeah, I trying to remember because it's like 10 years ago. I can't remember a specific book, but I do remember like how to sell B2B software, like Googling that and buying some books from Amazon, and there might have been some takeaways from there. But I think also it's like the sort of pattern recognition you get after a while by doing it again and again and again. And then as an engineer, like, initially, this is like people, they're not machines. How does this work? But then eventually actually you start seeing patterns and you can start reasoning about it, and you get sort of more it starts becoming more of a thing, and you can start improving.
Give me one example of like a signal that you saw in a meeting that said to you, "Shut up! Don't keep talking."
I think these days when I do like this presentation, is like obviously you try to understand the client a bit, where they are, and if this problem is relevant to them at all. But then once you kind of maybe start showing the tool, and if you see that, if they say that, oh, this is amazing, this could help me solve so much, and you kind of show them like the high level way it works, there is no reason to kind of jump in just to show them like the user administration or the compliance settings. Like you got them. Maybe you should set up another meeting to follow up, or like depending on the size of the customer, it might be still 20 more meetings before you end up with a deal. But at least this meeting this was the purpose, to get them hooked and willing to go to the next stage.
And you said that that was often the signal for you to say, I need to leave now. But was this what did you do to try and close a sale, or to at least get to the next step? Like, you weren't just like, okay, great, I'm just walking out now, right? You were trying to,
Yes. No, I wouldn't say that I have to go, but then I said, okay, I will, if this sounds good, these days anyways, like, what do you actually need for me to be able to make like a more formal decision? Is it like, do you have to talk to more stakeholders? Are there more people we should convince? Should I just send you a quote? Do we have to go through some procurements and security? I mean, eventually you become more proactive, right? Because in the beginning, I think what happened is that they said like, okay, well, I guess this is a story from when we went from like smaller clients where maybe there was like one meeting with a stakeholder and then one meeting with a CEO, and then it's all done, right? But then as you start getting bigger clients, you convince someone and you say, okay, will you buy it? And they're like, yes, but you need to show it to these people. And then, okay, yes, but actually, can you send some security documentation? And then, yes, but actually, can we have a data privacy agreement? And then, yes, but actually, you need to talk to procurement, which will squeeze you on price. And then, yes, but you also need to talk to IT. So now, having like in the beginning, you just had to do that, and it took forever, and it felt like completely powerless over that. But these days, you can obviously be proactive, and you can basically ask them like, who checks the contracts? Do we have to talk to procurement? Who's your IT, CTO or VPO IT that we need to talk to? And you can try to streamline that a bit more and do more of this in parallel. So I think it's in the beginning you have to kind of figure out that path, but as you start to seeing patterns, you can be more efficient.
What did you do for the demo to get it down to like a lot shorter than 2 hours? So clearly you weren't like demoing everything like, here's our privacy page and all of this stuff, right? But how did you figure out these are the things that I need to show this particular person who's in front of me right now?
I think I focus on the main workflow and the main value of the tool. Look, this is like you can search and find people, you can tailor, and you can export. And that's like, you don't have to make it more complicated than that. And then if they start, asking about what can I search for this, and can I filter, can I can I do, then you can show that. But like, you just need to get them to understand the basics and buy into that. I think that's, I guess what would give them the most value in the end. But I think just, put yourselves in their seats, like when you get a demo for a tool. Like, I'm not able to focus for even 30 minutes, not not close to 45 or 60 minutes. It's like someone just have to explain it to me in the simple terms first.
Yeah, it sounds like what you started doing was like telling them sort of what were the key things that the product did, and then answer some of the questions about the how, in terms of, like, can you filter on search results and stuff like that. But once you've built the product and you're really proud of hey, this search thing can do X, Y, Z, right? It's like you kind of assume everybody else is going to be excited about that, right? So you're like, oh yeah, and they're not, right? They don't care. So okay, great. So now we've got a product that has a better UI, better design. You've done enough of these 2-hour sales calls to know what not to do, and you're getting better at doing that. So presumably you're starting to close more of these deals now. How are you like finding customers? So obviously, you had the local, consulting firms that you could go to, but you're getting to the point now where it's like you need a bigger pool of leads. And so how did you find more people?
Yes, so I think the first sort of channel that we used, which was beyond our kind of immediate network and reach, was we started to go to these conferences. So there's a couple of conferences and we started noticing that, similar companies to the clients we already have were going to the same conferences, and they would typically have kind of booths on the conferences, and they were actually there to sell as well. But I noticed that during the talks, they were quite bored. So that's when you could approach them. So I just hey, how's it going in the breaks? And I just went from one to another. And typically we would have a customer there, so I could just point like they are customers and they are now also customers. Maybe you should. So that was like a way to do it. I think in the beginning we couldn't even afford the tickets for these conferences, so I had to submit the talk to have a presentation and then get in the door. But that was a quite successful channel for us in the beginning.
Okay, so so the talks was like you didn't want to necessarily do the talk, but it was a way of not paying for a ticket.
Exactly. I can't remember if it was any good or not. It's probably like mediocre.
Did the talk help? Like I would have thought getting some stage time or in front of attendees to talk about whatever might be a good thing.
Yes, to some extent it helped because you had more credibility and you had a cooler badge. And yes, absolutely. So yeah.
Right. So when you're wandering around the kind of the event and going booth to booth, tell me what like a typical conversation would look like.
At those conferences, it was like you could for me then I could start asking them like do you spend time on formatting resumes or CVs, and then because of the people that were there, the odds that they would say yes to that question is quite high. So if they said yes, then you had the conversation going, and you could start talking a bit more about how you solve that problem, and then sometimes that was the right person to talk to, and that led to maybe a meeting after the conference as well, and that was kind of the start.
I mean, it's so obvious, yet so many people fail to do it, which is just asking people if they have this problem that you're solving, right? Because if they say, no, I don't have that problem, right? You don't have to waste any more time with them, right? Or you can try to figure out what other problems they do have. But this mistake that so many kind of early stage founders make, which is just assuming that the person has the problem and just getting into the pitch of how we solve this stuff. And it's a lot more effective. And I think it's a lot easier as well when you're just asking them questions. Do you have this problem? Okay, how are you trying to solve it? Or are you trying to solve it? And, do you have to deal with this? Or when you have a bid, do you have to go through XYZ, right? Because that's like super helpful, both in terms of understanding your customers or your potential customers. But then it makes the sales process a lot easier as well. It makes the demos a lot easier and all that stuff because you know their situation better, right? So ask more questions. So great. So you went through that process. You figured out, you had these conversations with them on their breaks. What was the next step? Like, how did you try to walk away and sort of turn it into an opportunity?
Time, I guess we obviously tried to capture their contact details and then tried to set up a meeting, a follow-up, which, hopefully they would still be interested and in the mode of maybe potentially solving that problem, right? But I think we also learned lessons lately from events that, you might have a really good connection at an event and then you come back and if you email them a week later, there's all kinds of excuses for not talking to you. So I think probably actually April Dunford told me this, but I think she said that like the half-life of a lead from an event is like, it's 24 hours. So you have to try to, the best thing is to book the meeting there and then bring up your calendar and get them to commit.
Yeah, it's kind of mind-blowing what a difference that can make. Because when someone is kind of so excited, you assume they're going to be excited when you call them a couple of days later. And as I think most people have found, you might get those excuses. They might just ghost you. And it's like, you can't even get another opportunity to talk to them. And in many ways, just kind of, I guess, forcing it right there and then. It's like, okay, great. Here's my calendar. When are you available? And that kind of thing. At the very least, you're going to figure out, you're either going to get a commitment and a date scheduled to go and talk to them again, or you're going to realize they were just trying to be nice to you and they didn't really care. And that's good as well, right? So, it's just like, I think sometimes we're just afraid to get rejected, right? So it's like, it's easier just to say, oh, give me, let me have your email and we'll do this later. Okay, great. So lots of useful lessons there in terms of the event. Was that the main growth channel that you used to get to like the first million in ARR?
I would say there's like two other growth channels that's also been kind of consistently successful for us, and one is like just inbound leads from SEO, Google ads, things like that. That would be a bit more from a global stage, so it's like you wouldn't really know where that next lead might come from whenever someone like Google TV management system or something like that. And then as we started getting like a critical mass of customers, what we started noticing as well is that the employees in these consultancies, they change jobs sometimes, right? They jump to the competitor or they move to a adjacent sort of type of consultancy and maybe a slightly different industry. And they would, because of the user experience and the onboarding experience, I guess, we being very helpful, then they would take the system with them. So word of mouth and inbound has been like really good steady growth channels for us. It's not necessarily, so the word of mouth is a function in a way, or the number of customers or users we have. So over time, you get more and more as you grow, I would say. And then the inbound has been super useful, but also something which you, depending on the space you are in, you may or may not be able to scale indefinitely. So now we're also looking into other channels.
Okay, so let's unpack the inbound. So I think this was mostly SEO and some Google ads, right?
Yes.
Were you was this just about like optimizing your site and some pages for keywords, or were you regularly creating new content and publishing articles? Like, what were you doing to build up this traffic?
In the beginning, I would say it was about tweaking. Yes, we built some content, some blog posts with certain keywords, kept doing that for SEO purposes. But it's also took us a while to kind of have the marketing function that we needed that would, constantly produce like high quality content. I think in the beginning, it was more about getting the keywords out there.
Okay, so I guess what I'm trying to figure out is like how much work you had to do to, and how long it took for you to start to see some of these inbound leads coming in. And again, I think obviously we've got to kind of put this into context. This was like 10 years ago, and what you could do with SEO 10 years ago versus today is dramatically different. But I think I'm just curious, like, like how you went about kind of building this inbound engine.
Oh, it was, I guess, one thing that springs to mind is obviously one thing is bidding for these keywords, but a lot for us, it was also figuring out which keywords we shouldn't bid for, because we got a lot of kind of traffic that we didn't want, people that was looking for a resume tool like the one I built initially for applying for a job, or confusing it with a recruiting system or something like that. So the CV or resume word is difficult to optimize for. So you get this like tiny long tail of words, and which may or may not have the volume you need in order to optimize for it. So it was also a lot about tweaking that. My colleague Andreas spent quite a lot of time on it in the beginning.
And what was have you been mostly sales led? Did you introduce some kind of product led component? Like once you got this inbound visitor turning into a lead, were they able to sign up and start using the product, or was this just requesting a demo or something like that?
It's always been that sort of, typically you would do a demo. And I think that also because we started with companies maybe like 40, 50 employees, and then we gradually grew into like up to 1,000, and now we are in like 10, 20,000 employees size. And I think so I went to a workshop with this guy called Jackal, who's written this like huge book called The Revenue Architecture. I think it has, like, for me, that explained a few things. It's like if you have very high volume, low price, or low ACV transactions, then you can't have a sales team doing a demo for each one of them. That's too expensive, right? And also the expectation from the customer is to just click and put in the credit card and get started. But I think we moved quite quickly upwards, like some like mid-size to enterprise segment, where they do expect more of a hands-on. There is more of a procurement process. There is more compliance to check. So the PLG type of motion made less sense for us. That doesn't mean that every now and then we get like a smaller sign up that we think, okay, maybe we should, have some self-serve version which could make it easier, but it's not the target segments that we're targeting. It probably isn't a perfect match with the PLG motion.
So given where your business is today, what happens if somebody with a 2-person company comes in and requests a demo? Are you still going through that process, or are you just like,
we're going through a very lightweight process on that?
So we talked about SEO, some Google ads. the conferences and word of mouth as being these main growth channels getting you to the first million. You continued growing the business up to like 4 million ARR before you decided to raise funding. Was it again just doubling down on those areas, or build a great product, drive more word of mouth, keep going to these events, or did you start doing other things as well?
I think from 1 million to 4 million, I think we started to grow abroad. So at the time we had started in Norway, and we got our first sort of Swedish customer, our first Danish customer. We grew up into a few other industries. So we were kind of expanding geographically and also slightly into adjacent industries to be able to keep going.
And what was the playbook? Just again going to more events, doing more AdWords?
Yes, at the time, yes. So I think what maybe we did, which we've done a few times now, is that as soon as you start getting like a lead from a different country or region, and sometimes you have to translate the UI, sometimes you have to find someone local who can onboard them. So we've several times, like instead of hiring a salesperson first, we actually hired a customer success person first in a new geography, so that we can sort of sell from another country, but they need to see and believe that they will be taken care of and actually successfully onboard. For that, sometimes you need a local person.
So you were a first-time founder with CV Partner. You were a developer and hadn't done sales, so you had to learn how to do that as well. You tried doing the design, but then decided that probably wasn't something that you were going to keep doing. What about the hiring? Did you have experience in hiring and building a team before you started this business?
No, absolutely not. So that has been obviously a learning journey, and also I think looking back at it, we've been sometimes super lucky with the hires we have made, but for sometimes we have also been a bit naive. And I think as you grow with a growth company, you just if you're growing 50% year on year, then the requirement and the demand on the business is getting a lot higher, especially like on the leadership team every year. So someone you hired like last year, which was then step up and absolutely amazing, you might actually need to hire someone even better than the year after. So it's like that sort of shifting upwards constantly has been definitely a learning point. You just sometimes you may not have seen that kind of excellence before, so you just have to believe that there is someone that out there that's even better, and then when you find them, it's like, oh, this is amazing. And so chasing that sort of top talent is a constant thing that we're doing.
You said sometimes I was naive. Give me an example of what you mean by that.
No, I would say that as an entrepreneur, we love solving problems, right? We don't see, or we love challenges when we don't necessarily see obstacles like as a complete stop. We see them as something you can work around, or you see potential in opportunities. And sometimes if you apply that to people, you might find that actually we kind of knew that this wasn't going to work out, but we just really, really hoped it could work out, or we saw that they had some potential, or we thought we saw this. So that's like, you have to be tough on the hiring. I think it's a lesson learned.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting way to frame it, in terms of like, seeing it as a problem. You see somebody and you like them, on a personal level. They seem to be like a cultural fit. There might be a gap in terms of where you need them to be, and you're like, you kind of see it as a problem. It's like, well, we could do X, Y, Z, and that would help them to do this, and
sometimes that works out, but sometimes it doesn't. So
how have things changed? Well, first of all, why did you then decide to raise money? and I wanted to kind of talk about how things have changed with the business since then. So what was the, you're getting along, like, you're 4 million ARR, you're bootstrapped, you guys own 100% of the company. Why did you decide you wanted to go and raise money now?
So, I mean, as we talked about, this was obviously a learning journey for me. Like, so, the first year I had to learn, or I had to build it, and I had to learn to sell, and then I had to learn about compliance, perhaps, and then I had to learn about hiring. It's like this constant sort of development, and it was kind of portioned out during these 10 years. So really a fun journey and amazing. But at some point we started, making a bit of kind of projections, and because the only way we could hire or expand was to actually get customers. So we had to chase real customers, and we had to sign a deal, and then we could go back and we can hire this one person that would help us maybe go to the next stage. And that I think that was good. You build a healthy business, you focus on the customers, and you get in revenue, and that was super helpful. But at some point we just started seeing that actually we had a bit more cash to spend right now. We could spend 1 year or 2 years instead of 5 years to get to this point. And then it started making sense. But then going from being a bootstrapped where like the founders owned the company and some employees owned the company, it was like to kind of going over to this like VC side. That was, that was a bit of a journey for us. So, but we did it very softly and smoothly. We found the most friendly Norwegian VC, and they only took a minority stake, of course. And it was like a nice transition into that for us. But it's also made us a lot more professional. We went from 20 to 40 people in 6 to 12 months. It was like suddenly you're in the room and like half of the people are completely new. So that was obviously a big transition for us. And
so for many bootstrap founders, raising VC funding is like going to the dark side, right? And probably you had some concerns. You could rationally you could see the benefits of doing that. It sounds like you had some luck in terms of finding a great VC that kind of fitted with what you guys wanted, the way you wanted to run the business. How have things changed beyond that in terms of do you feel like there's more pressure on you now about growing faster? Like,
that growth pressure is also coming from my ambitions. So yes, you have some extra pressure, of course, but I think it's more important that when you decide to go down that route, that you just align your ambitions with what their expectations are. So the VCs, they want to invest in companies, and ideally they want them to multiply a lot, right? So and if you are successful, you obviously might become like the star in the portfolio and they give you lots of support. But if it goes completely bad, maybe they're not so much, or you get more heat. But for now it's been amazing in terms of the support, more professional board meetings than we've ever had. They're helping us a lot in terms of just seeing what they have seen in other companies, and if they see something that we are not doing or something that we could do better or something we're missing, they're pointing that out, and that's a great help, I think. So it's for now it's still all good, but I think you have to align that this is the journey we want to go on, and that has to be aligned with this typical VC journey, right? So if you start backtracking or look, I want to go back to bootstrapping, then it's like that's too late.
So given what you know now, do you feel like if you could have done it all over again, you would have raised some VC funding earlier?
Yes, a few years earlier, not 10 years earlier. I think, like, because I wasn't ready. We weren't ready as an organization. There was that would have been too soon for us. If I were to ever start a new company, then you don't know if you would raise money sooner, because then you maybe know more. But for us, I think, maybe a few years earlier, but not 10 years earlier. That's my take on it now.
Okay, great. Let's wrap up and get on to the lightning round. I've got 7 quick fire questions for you. Ready? What's one of the best pieces of business advice you've received?
So recently it was from the chairman of our board who said, like, take control of the pipeline. And I can explain what that means, but just going from being very reactive and, running in all directions in terms of what's coming in from the inbound, just trying to change that so that actually you go after something and you get it in. You can do so much more with that. And that's the journey we are on now.
Yeah, that statement, take control of the pipeline. We could probably do a whole episode, right, just on expanding on that. But maybe we should one day. What book would you recommend to our audience and why?
So I'll bring up the book I mentioned earlier, The Revenue Architecture by Jacko van der Kooi. He just takes so much sort of SaaS models and theory that's out there, and he puts it into context so that, like we talked about earlier, is like people say you should do PLG, but then actually you need to make up your mind if this is right for the context your company is in. And with that context and the framework he provides, it's also a lot easier to kind of take different pieces of advice and see where they fit in and why you should maybe listen to it or maybe why you shouldn't at times.
I should get him on the show, I think. That would be a good conversation to have. What's one attribute or characteristic in your mind of a successful founder?
But I think at least for a growth company, you do need to reinvent yourself quite often. So like, every 6 to 18 months, your role and what you do in the business is going to change. So, we started coding and then I became the salesperson. And now I'm more the strategic leader. And that requires that ability, I think, to change or reinvent yourself. Yeah.
What's your favorite personal productivity tool or habit?
I think that's another takeaway from the 7 habits of highly successful people is the delegation. So you try not to kind of be the bottleneck in the business. Try not to, everything has to go via you. Find, as soon as you figure out how to do something, see if you can get someone else to do it. It requires investment from you. So like the first time you delegate something, it's going to take longer than if you've done it yourself. But the third time, the fourth time, you just see it happening and it's magic and it's so nice and you free up your time and you can focus on the next challenge.
What's a new or crazy business idea you'd love to pursue if you had the time?
So I guess might be coming to that, but my passion is like food and wine, and I just like, bringing tech, maybe some AI into that space. That would be really fun. Probably wouldn't make any money, but it would be closer to my heart, yes.
Well, what's an interesting or fun fact about you that most people don't know?
So I have a 250-year-old farm back in Norway.
A farm?
Yes, it's not like any animals or anything at now, but it is more or less like it was 250 years old. So it's really like going back in time. So, working digitally, being on Zoom calls all day and working software. Sometimes it's just really nice to just go out on the countryside and, chop some wood or go back to basics.
Wow. That sounds pretty cool, actually.
Yeah, it's kind of a digital detox for me that I do every now and then. Yeah.
And finally, what's one of your most important passions outside of your work?
So I would say food, wine, just like all the geekery you can do into these like wine regions and grapes and types of. It's I would love to spend more time on that, but that will be for later. But
So Erling, thank you so much for joining me. It's been a pleasure unpacking your story and trying to extract some lessons for our listeners. If people want to check out CV Partner, they can go to cvpartner.com. And by now, they should know it's not for managing their CV, right? And if folks want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, you'll find me on LinkedIn or erling@cvpartner.com.
Awesome. Thanks, man. It's been a pleasure. I wish you and the team the best of success.
Thank you so much, Omar. Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Cheers.